Hi, and welcome to this course on cap tables. Today at JioGenNext Academy, we are going to dive into a critical aspect of running a startup, understanding cap tables and how they reflect ownership changes when you bring in investors. If you are an entrepreneur, knowing how to manage your cap table is essential because it allows you to track ownership stakes and manage equity distributions, which will change as you grow your company and raise funding. So what exactly is a cap table? Simply put, a cap table tells us who owns how much of a company at any given time. It's a document that shows the breakdown of shares between the founders and the investors. When you raise capital from an investor, they are buying a percentage of your company in exchange of money. This creates a shift in the ownership structure of the company, which is where cap table comes into picture. Cap tables don't just reflect ownership percentages. They also track the impact of dilution and rounds of funding and much more. Today we are going to understand all of this with the help of a practical example. Let's start with the concept of dilution. This occurs when new shares are issued to the investors and existing shareholders' percentages decrease even though they still own the same number of shares. To explain how this works, we will walk through a detailed example using a tech company called Nanocore Innovations, founded by two entrepreneurs, Rohan and Arpit. Rohan and Arpit each invested 50,000 rupees as share capital when they started Nanocore. So the total share capital is 1 lakh rupees and they decided on a par value or face value of 10 rupees per share. This means each of them holds 5,000 shares, and since there are 10,000 shares in total, they each own 50% of the company. Let's visualize this with a cap table. Company Nanocore Innovations, total shares 10,000, founder share Rohan 5,000 shares, 50%, and Arpit 5,000 shares, 50%. Price per share is 10 rupees. This is the company's shareholding structure before any funding. Fast forward to 1 year. Nanocore raises 1 crore from New Tech Capital, and in exchange, New Tech Capital will own 10% of the company. Here is where we begin to see changes in the cap table. A few things will change. 1. The stakes held by existing shareholders. 2. The total number of shares in the company. And 3. The price per share for the new investors. But remember, when a company raises capital, founders don't sell their shares. Instead, the company issues new shares and the money from the investors go into the company's bank account. This means Rohan and Arpit's number of shares will remain the same, but the total number of shares in the company will increase. Now let's calculate the impact of this investment on the cap table. Rohan and Arpit's collective shareholding, which was 100% of the company, is now going to be 90% since New Tech Capital is buying 10%. So the existing 10,000 shares will represent 90% of the company's ownership. We now need to figure out how many shares represent 10%. To do that, we can use simple calculation. If 10,000 shares is equal to 90%, then 10% is equal to X number of shares. If you cross multiply, X comes out to 1111 shares, rounded to the nearest whole number. So Nanocore will issue 1,111 new shares to New Tech Capital. Let's update the cap table now. Total shares will now become 11,111. Founder share, Rohan will hold 5,000 shares, Arpit will hold 5,000 shares, and New Tech Capital will now hold 1,111 shares, which is 10% of the company. As you can see, Rohan and Arpit still own the same number of shares, but their ownership percentages have been diluted from 50% to 45% each. This change happened because the company issued new shares and not because they sold their own. One more thing to calculate: the price per share for new tech capital. To do this, we simply divide the total investment amount by the number of shares they received. So 1 crore divided by 1111 shares gives us a price per share of 9,000 rupees. Alternately, you can also calculate this by dividing the valuation of the company by the total number of shares in the company. Either method works, and it's important to understand both when creating your cap table. So that's a basic introduction to how cap table works and how they evolve when you raise capital. We walked through how dilution happens, how new shares are issued to investors, and how the ownership percentages of founders change after funding round. You're now ready to start building your own cap tables and understand how funding will impact your company's shareholding structure. Thank you for watching and good luck with your journey ahead.